In West Africa, only one democracy has bragging rights to have never known a successful coup. But Senegal experiencing one of those moments where it's being put to the test. Protests, rioting, a crackdown erupting after the term-limited outgoing president suddenly announced a 6-month election delay. This just ahead of the official start of the campaign. Macky Sall's successor was due to be picked at the end of this month. We'll ask about the justification and whether the same leader who drew worldwide praise last July for resisting the temptation to try and outstay his 2 terms in power is now attempting, as the opposition claims, a thinly disguised electoral coup. It took street protests to force Macky Sall's predecessor, Abdoulaye Wade, to respect the constitution and go in 2012. What outcome this time, and what response from Senegal's neighbors? ECOWAS has its plate full already, with coup leaders in nearby Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso recently electing to quit the regional bloc rather than bend to a roadmap for return to civilian rule. Why do all these governance issues seem to be coming to a head at the same time? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking, is democracy up in the air in Senegal? And joining us from Dakar, Doudou Sidibé, professor of political science at Gustave Eiffel University here in Paris, president of the RDP-DEFCO party, which last week allied for the elections with the coalition led by jailed opposition leader Ousmane Sonko. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We'll be joined shortly from New York by historian Mamadou Diouf, professor of African Studies at Columbia University. And joining us from Edinburgh in Scotland, Ramazal Dieng, lecturer in African Studies and International Development at the University of Edinburgh. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
And we welcome back former French ambassador to Senegal, Nicolas Normand. You're the author in French of The Great Book of Africa. Good to see you. Your reactions on the hashtag F24debate. Yeah, this Monday, our correspondent reporting internet restrictions as Parliament gathered to approve a delay to Senegal's February 25th poll. Riot police back again in force around the National Assembly. Leo McGuinn has more.
Fresh clashes in Dakar between demonstrators and police, with officers using tear gas to try and quell the protests on Monday. The latest scuffles took place in front of the National Assembly, where deputies were debating a controversial constitutional bill. They were discussing the 6-month postponement of the presidential election, which was announced on Saturday by President Macky Sall. News which protesters say that they will not take lying down.
What's happening at the National Assembly is illegal. They are traitors. They have betrayed the Senegalese people. We elected them to the National Assembly to represent us, the Senegalese people.
I don't think that the decisions that come out of the Assembly are suitable for discussion. They are not deputies of the people, but deputies of the President.
The prospect of postponed elections triggered a wave of protests across the capital on Sunday, with clashes between demonstrators and the police, who made several arrests. The government has since restricted mobile internet access in an attempt to temper the dissent. This is the first time since 1963 that a presidential election has been postponed in Senegal, a country that has never experienced a coup d'etat.
Doudou Sidibé, are you surprised by Saturday's announcement by the president?
More or less, okay. I knew that Macky Sall is able to do everything, but except trying to extend his tenure, okay, because his decision is making our country unstable. Because as you can see, a lot of protesters, demonstrators are around the National Assembly. Myself, I was there, but I was not able to get access to the National Assembly, and it's ours. We have the right to get in and follow the debates, but they forbid us to do so. And I think that the reasons, maybe we'll come back to the reason, but the reasons he put forward are not at all true. Okay, the main reason is that his candidate is about to lose the elections, according to a lot of survey here. According to people I met here in Dakar, I asked them if they are ready to get to vote for the candidate chosen by Macky Sall. They say no. They would like to go for alternates, to change the regime, because they are suffering a lot. Okay.
And so and I'll put it to you, Rama Saladiang. It has been noted that in the end, the Constitutional Council approving 20 candidacies. There had been criticism because some, for instance, were dual nationals, others were not. Among the dual nationals, of course, was the son of former President Abdoulaye Wade, Karim Wade. And that the accusation has been floated that this is going to allow them, if you see the glass half full, to rectify those inconsistencies, or if you see it half empty, as you just heard from Doudou Sidibé, to perhaps change the playing field.
Exactly. I totally agree with what Professor Sidibé just said here. What we're witnessing is just concerning. It's unprecedented. We've seen a similar attempt in 2011, especially on the 23rd of June 2011, when President Abdoulaye Wade tried to change the constitution to allow for an extension of his prolongation of his reign. But what we are seeing today is so concerning because after a period, a very I'm even grasping for my words, because what we've seen a lot of people losing their lives. We've seen police brutality. We've seen the restriction of the internet access. And on Saturday, the president using the fallacious argument of a crisis narrative, a crisis rhetoric, to say that it's because of Rose Wardini and Karim Wade's dual nationality, the supposed corruption of judges, that we have to postpone the elections. It's just fallacious for many of the Senegalese citizens. I was there between November and mid-January. And what we're witnessing is a lot of people have lost confidence, trust in the governing leaders. And what Macky Sall is trying to
you
do
mentioned,
here,
you referenced there, Rama, 2011. Back then there were mass protests. This time it's been sort of a cat and mouse game this Monday between police. Far fewer protests. Protesters in the streets on Monday? Why is that?
But the protests are not dating from Monday. I think we need to take the longue durée approach to see that since 2021, we have had protestations, May 2021, June 2023. So many people, at least 50 young people losing their lives. So I think we need to replace what is happening in the longue durée and not analyze it as a separated incident. So what we are witnessing here is President Macky Sall trying to circumvent the constitution to prolong his reign when the majority of the people are not do not agree, simply. So I've been watching the debates today at the parliament, and what the majority is trying to argue is that they are not, in fact, trying to change the constitution. They are just trying to amend part of the constitution. But what I have seen the member of parliament say today is that this is not acceptable. Those who are from the opposition and the majority that I've seen express themselves are expressing their worries, because we don't know what all this will lead to. This is unprecedented. It is an institutional coup, and it is done by the incumbent president live on TV in suit and not in military clothes like we've seen for our neighbors like Niger and so on.
Nicolas, let me bring in Nicolas Normand on this point. Because you heard there just a moment ago Rama Saladiang mentioning how there's been deadly violence over the last couple of years. In 2021, in 2023, the protests the crackdown was lethal. Would you say, because you were ambassador to Senegal in 2011, that this is it's more ruthless this time than back then?
It is more ruthless possibly this time, but already in 2011 there were clashes between opponents and the presidential camp with the police. There were demonstrations, there were tires which were burnt, there were a number of people who were dead, about, I don't remember the precise number, but more than 10. So it was already a violent situation. And the risk of the decision taken by President Macky Sall is obvious.
And these, by the way, are images from 2011 that we're seeing on our screens here in front of you. You're saying it's different this time.
Well, every election is different. In the problem in 2011 was that President Ouad presented for a third term. He ran for a third term at that time, and this was against the constitution, according to most people.
Against most people. Now it's a little bit different. They're simply saying, and we can listen to the government spokesperson there, saying that basically this is just to make the election fairer and more consistent. Let's take a listen.
Today you can see people, the opposition, protesting, even though they've complained to the president about the system of endorsement for the presidential elections. These are people who say, 1 minute, the endorsement system didn't work, the Constitutional Court didn't do its job. But then they say they don't want the election to be delayed, even though that's what they wanted to begin with.
Nicolas Normand.
Yes. Well, it's the first time in Senegal that the incumbent president does not run for office. He is not in the ballot for the first time. So this is something that should be taken into account.
Except for Léopold Senghor, of course.
Yes. Well, yes, and but the president, by deciding to postpone the date of the election, he did not precise the delay, the duration of the postponement. But the National Assembly is discussing right now a delay of 6 months. 6 months, it's not a term, it's only 6 months. So the reaction of the opposition is very strong, very radical. So,
but there is a problem here because constitutionally his mandate ends at the beginning of April. So what happens between April and August?
Yes, but it is supported by the National Assembly. At the same time, there is a new law that will be voted, that will be approved. So I am not myself knowledgeable in legal matters, but politically speaking, it seems normal that the National Assembly discusses the measure taken by the president, and they approve a delay, a postponement of 6 months. But the reaction of all the candidates, the 19 candidates of the opposition, is very violent, they totally disapprove this decision, and they invite the population to react. They don't precise what kind of reaction, but they say they should mobilize against the decision taken by the president. So it may fuel a period of violence, of clashes, and this is what I fear.
Doudou Sidibé, what are you telling your militants, your supporters?
Yeah, just to say that we have to put forward legal arguments. Because what the ambassador Normand said, of course he doesn't know about these legal arguments, but legally, Macky Sall has not the right to extend his tenure, because the Article 27, says that the mandate is for 5 years, and no one can go beyond. Okay,
that's in the Constitution, and to his point that. It'll be interesting to watch what opposition leaders tell their supporters to do. What are you telling your supporters to do?
My supporters, I would tell my supporters to protest, to demonstrate strongly against that. Because what we fear is Macky Sall is trying to extend his tenure for 6 months, okay? But at the end of the day, it can be more than that. People are saying that it can be 1 to 2 years. It's not normal, okay? And people should protest against that, because he cannot extend his tenure for even for 1 second. And the Constitutional Court is responsible for elections. Macky Sall cannot, cancel these elections.
Even if there's a bill of parliament.
No, even the parliament, but because the constitutional law is on top of the laws that will be voted in the parliament, okay? And as I said, the constitution, okay, according to the Article 92, is responsible of elections, okay? It means that someone is giving the beginning of a game, okay, but he's not able to change the rules, okay, of the game. But he's trying to change the rules.
Trying to change the rules, you're saying. When he announced the delay on Saturday, Macky Sall insisted he was not going to outlast his stay as president. Let's listen.
For my part, my solemn undertaking not to stand in the presidential election remains unchanged. I will initiate an open national dialogue to create the conditions for free, transparent and inclusive elections in a Senegal that is at peace and reconciled.
And we can now cross to New York and historian Mamadou Diouf at Columbia University. Thank you so much for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Your reaction listening to Senegal's outgoing president, Macky Sall. All right, we're gonna. I'm sorry, Mamadou. We have a sound issue, which we're going to try to correct.
Yeah.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Thank you for having me. I think that this outcome for me has been predictable, because if you look at what has happened for these last 2 years, is that President Macky Sall have tried to actually be ready and was ready for a third term. And the Senegalese mobilized and made sure that he was in no position to go for a third term. But since then, what we have been experiencing is a president who has been, jailing people, who have been taking decisions against the Constitution, who have not been, while saying that he was going to abandon power, that he was not doing anything to make sure that things will happen in the proper way. So
let me ask you about that point, because you have his main rival, Ousmane Sonko, who's in jail, and his number two, who the Constitutional Council approved his candidacy as president, even though he too now is also in jail. Bassirou Diomaye, is that why this is all happening? Because he fears the Ousmane Sonko-backed candidate?
I think his calculation didn't work. The fact is, Sonko is in jail. Sonko is not able to run, but the people from his movement has been able to ensure that at least they will have two alternatives and they will be present in the ballot, which they have been able to do. I also think that the president has chosen Amadou Ba, but his choice was not accepted by all the members of his party, and he has not been able to tame them. And this situation is today, they are no longer able actually to mobilize for Ba. And it seemed that probably the president today is no longer sure that he had made the best choice possible. So he is in a quandary. I think that he is caught into overplaying his end. And right now, what he's basically trying to do against all the odds and against the Constitution, but what the former French ambassador said, he knows that it doesn't work. Why is the Constitution could be overridden by the National Assembly on what a fallacious basis, as my colleagues were saying.
Nicolas Normand?
Yes, but on the one hand, we have to acknowledge that there were a number of irregularities in the election process. Some candidates were not selected, were excluded without much transparency. This is the case for several of them, including Karim Wade and Sonko and others, Mimi Touré and others. And on the other hand, the decision taken by the president is certainly questionable because of legal aspects on the one hand also, but also because he may have political agendas behind. As it was said, he might lose the election. His candidate is a hand-picked candidate, the Prime Minister. The current Prime Minister. Might lose the election. They were also...
So they're basically buying time. So you agree on that, Mamadou Diop?
He was not supported by his own camp.
I disagree, absolutely disagree with him. You cannot put Karim Wade and Ousmane Sonko at the same level, one. Yeah. Second, the problem the ambassador is talking about is a problem solved legally, that it is possible.
But there was a lady who had the two nationalities.
No. It's possible to take the decision to get her out of the list without postponing the election. For Karim Wade, you have two lies which has been circulating. If you remember, when Karim was trying to be candidate before this election, he said that he was no longer actually French. He abandoned his French citizenship. The second thing is he abandoned it 1 week after actually the closure of the candidacy.
Yes, but at least there was one lady who should not have been cleared by the Constitutional Council, Mrs. Rose Wardini, because she is binational. She is both French and Senegalese. So this was an irregularity.
All right, let me bring in Rama Saladian. Go ahead.
Yes, if I may, the fact that there is an irregularity is the fault of the Constitutional Court. It's by no means the fault. It's by no means an argument for stopping the whole process. If there is something that is not working, if there is one candidate that should not be there, I think there are legal means to get them out, which is to just stop their candidacy by all means. But I mean, she may even be accused of perjury. Okay. But the fact that the whole process is being stopped, despite the candidates who have been selected regularly being eligible to go further, I think this is not acceptable. And also the fact that these very candidates have not been consulted. The president didn't have the elegance of just consulting these candidates that have been approved, that have gathered their sponsors, that have gone through all the meshes, let's say, that have been put in place by the current regime, I think is not acceptable. So what we are having here is the fact that this delay can open the door to all kind of irregularities. And the fact that 6 months, he's talking about a delay of 6 months, but what guarantees us that come August, the elections will go ahead as planned? We have no guarantee. So what we can do today, and I totally agree with the candidates that have decided, who have decided to start their campaign, is to support them, because there is no legal mean, there is no constitutional mean for the presidential elections to be postponed. And that's something that Macky Sall needs to accept. He chose his candidate. Whether his candidate is suitable or not is not our matter to discuss. The rules of the game are set in such a way that the election should go ahead today, yesterday. So We shouldn't go back.
Nicolas Normand.
Yes, I agree totally that the decision taken by the President Macky Sall is very questionable. But what should be also questionable would be a very violent reaction with clashes, with people being killed by the police or this kind of thing. So there is a risk of such a situation. We are now at the beginning of a period of uncertainty. So let's hope that all the political leaders will prefer to negotiate a peaceful solution. I think it will be very difficult anyway to cancel the decision taken by the president. So we have to do with this 6 months postponement, whether we like it or not, and probably we do not like it. But we have to do with it to avoid much violence, much trouble, because it would be to the detriment of the country of Senegal and to the detriment of the people of Senegal, certainly.
If you allow me. I think it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable at all to say that we have to postpone and people have to react peacefully. Right now, what is being expressed in the streets of Senegal is people being fed up. It is, I think, their understanding that the social contract that they had with their leader is no longer that they were the one that.
For peaceful demonstrations. Peaceful demonstrations, it's okay.
But why do we don't police them? They are expressing their anger. Why?
No,
let me bring in Doudou Sidibé, because you're in Dakar. So just tell us, what's the mood right now in terms of whether what's the strategy? What have you been saying with other political formations? What's the plan going forward?
The plan going forward is that we're gonna fight. You know, after this this debate, I will participate in a meeting where. We talk about our strategy to fight. We are ready to fight against that because it's not that normal that Macky Sall decided himself alone to postpone or to cancel the elections. Okay, and the fact of saying that we're gonna accept it, it is not acceptable. From here in Senegal, people are fed up with Macky Sall. They no longer want Macky Sall to be president because they are very, they are suffering, socially speaking. Young people are going to US, through Nicaragua. Others are going to Canary Islands, and they are losing their life, in the sea. And they have no more hope, in Macky Sall rule, okay? And if you know Macky Sall, he gets used to that kind of abuse of authority. We remember in 2002,
he said last July that he wasn't going to run again.
Yeah, but Macky Sall is not someone who's going to respect rules or democracy,
But I think Macky Sall actually did not run, not because it was his own desire or his own decision. The Senegalese people decided that he was going to respect their constitution. They fought for that. This is the first thing. They fought to make sure that he was not going to be a candidate. And this is very important because it's about the respect of the constitution. And the Senegalese will keep fighting. And I don't understand the former French ambassador saying that we have to avoid blood and bloody situation. But we have been living in this bloody situation for these last 2 years. Why didn't he react? Macky Sall has been putting in prison everybody. Why didn't he react? And why people, because the president is violent, they are going just to stay quiet because they are terrorized. This is the problem. And the problem is, has the Senegalese has fought to make sure that Macky is not going to run for a third term. They are going to fight him to make sure that he's not going to mess up
Mamadou Diouf.
Electoral calendar.
Mamadou Diouf, let me ask you, Senegal is a bit of an outlier when it comes to a lot of former French colonies in that it has a very, it's got a thriving democracy. we've seen before. It's got a strong civil society. Where is the pressure going to have to come from for what the consensus on this panel is, which is to respect the Constitution? Where's the pressure going to come from? Is it going to come from the politicians? Is it going to come from civil society? Is it going to come from the powerful religious associations, the brotherhoods like the Mourides?
What has happened, if you want, is for these last 12 years, the whole system, which has made the Senegalese democracy successful, if you want, is precisely because the possibilities of not going outside a kind of general consensus, a possibility for people to always engage in a conversation. All those things have been unraveling because of the way in which President Macky Sall has been exercising his power and authority. And today, what is very important to notice is, as my colleagues were saying, not only the youth is fed up, but you have a majority of the Senegalese population who wants to get rid of this system, and in particular the system which has been reinforced by Abdoulaye Wade.
But it's happened before. Senegal's been tested before. In 2000, you had the longtime opposition leader Abdoulaye Wade unseating the incumbent Abdou Diouf, and it was touch and go back then. First election of the mobile era. Then we were talking about it earlier, 2011. It's not the first time Senegal's been tested.
But it's why this is just another experience the Senegalese are going to face, and I'm very optimistic. But what is changing this time is that probably the people who are in a position to take over power are not part of this old Senegalese political class. We are going towards probably a rupture, and a radical rupture which will change the regime. And this is what is frightening, Macky Sall's clique.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Nicolas Normand. And
yes, it's not worse. This situation does not justify a climate of violence. It's not worthwhile a bloodbath. It's not worthwhile much violence. It's just a delay of 6 months, and you should not.
But the rest of the panel's been saying the bloodbath has been coming from Macky Sall's government, 2021, 2023.
If the reaction is too violent, there is a risk of destabilizing the country. There is a risk of a military coup also in Senegal. That will be much worse than waiting 6 months for an elected president. Right. So you have to be very cautious in dealing with this situation, in avoiding that it becomes not under control. It may become uncontrollable and very risky, very dangerous for the people, for the country, for the democracy. So you should avoid such a situation. It should be negotiated and discussed with the president, with the religious leaders, with the main candidates, and so on.
All right, Rama Salah Dieng, let me ask you, because you heard earlier Mamadou Diouf talking about this unraveling of the public space, as it were, that's taken place over the last decade. That's the way Mamadou Diouf described it. It's not just down to one person. Why is that? What's changing in Senegal?
What's changing is that we have a system that people have been calling the Senegalese exception for so long. But we are realizing that our country or our democracy has also been safeguarded at the price of violence. It is something that has been constant over the year. So Mr. Normand talking about this bloodshed as if it was something new, I think is really replacing or ignoring the long history of violence that has also been there. For example, in 1988, we've seen what happened with the judge that has been assassinated. And all that, even when that judge was assassinated, it was not the reason for postponing the elections. So I think here it would make more sense to appeal to Macky Sall's goodwill rather than asking people not to express their anger. I think there is a form of policing or a form of symbolic violence of asking people who have had enough, who have lost dear family members or comrades and so on, asking them to control themselves rather than asking Macky Sall to take a step back. I think right now we would only need Macky Sall to make one move, which is to say, okay, I tried, it didn't work, I take a step back.
Which is what happened 10 years ago or a decade ago. I'm going to ask you the same question, Rama, that I asked earlier to Mamadou Diouf. Where's the pressure going to come from to bear on the president right now? Where is it going to, from civil society, from the opposition, from the religious leaders?
From all of them together. I think what we've seen is that the social contract is being redefined, renegotiated, reshaped, and how it can emerge out of this and really in its integrity is for all of us, civil society. Today I heard that the Muhid leader had said, yet these elections cannot be postponed. It will also take the election leaders, the opposition leaders, as they did, to come as a bloc. Our comrade Dudu here, to come as a bloc and say this is not acceptable. It would also take the MPs, uncorruptible MPs at the parliament to resist and to be the last rampart for our democracy. And that's what I'd say today.
All right, among the international reactions, that of the regional bloc of West African states, ECOWAS, the Commission of ECOWAS expressing concern over, in a communique over the circumstances that have led to the postponement of the election and appealing to the competent authorities to expedite the various processes in order to set a new date for the election. The same communique hailing Macky Sall for upholding his earlier decision not to run for another term, encouraging him to continue to defend and protect Senegal's long-standing democratic tradition. Doudou Sidibé, your reaction to that communique?
I think that this communique is very soft, They should order, strongly Macky Sall to stop this process, okay? To allow Senegalese people to go to and choose their president, okay? But what we can notice is that he has some supporters, among this ECOWAS organization like Embalo, the president of Bissau Guinea, and maybe, I think that they should be, they should do exactly what they did for others who did a coup, because this is a constitutional coup. And I don't make difference between military coup and constitutional coup, okay? It's just coup.
There was a recent election in Liberia, Doudou Sidibé, where the result was very close and the incumbent in the end accepted his defeat. There appears to have been diplomatic pressure that was brought to bear. What are you expecting? What are you asking the international community for Senegal?
Yeah, to put pressure on Macky Sall. I saw the U.S. embassy in a communique in Senegal. It's exactly what all the international communities should do to put pressure on him. It's not late. He can step back. And avoid bloodshed as what Ambassador Norma feared. Instead of putting pressure on Senegalese people or political parties or whatever, they should put pressure on Macky Sall, because Macky Sall is the main actor of this situation.
Mamadou Diouf, let me ask you, we have a situation right now in West Africa where we've seen coup contagion. Is what's going on in Senegal purely a domestic matter, or are there dots to be connected with what's going on in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger?
Of course, because it's our environment. But the global environment is also an environment which is defined by by questions about democracy, by question about the respect of democratic rule. And the fact is, and I think that the Senegalese has to be praised for that, they have been fighting to uphold the promise of their constitution, the promise of their political culture, the promise of avoiding violence. Because the issue is, and we see it, we have seen this moment of very violent reaction of the Senegalese. But in front of Macky Sall and the way she has been reacting, the Senegalese, and I praise them for that, they have been trying to avoid bloodshed. And they have been making sure that, in particular, the young people are not killed or put in prison. And this is an important moment. And I think that slowly, because of that, the civil society which has been engaged, but probably I hope it's going to happen, the leaders, the religious leaders, which has lost part of their legitimacy thanks to Macky Sall and thanks to all this manipulation, have been at least trying to demonstrate peacefully. But the reaction is the reaction of the state, the violent reaction of it. And Macky Sall has to be singled out as the most violent president the Senegal has experienced. The president who has been very bellicose, always ready to fight. When people have, is the reason why people are not even sometimes accepting his call for dialogue. Dialogue with whom? And why is he dialoguing? He has to leave, one. And the other element which is important you mentioned, it's quite interesting to see that President Macky Sall postponed the election, still say, I am not going to run for, but he didn't say, I have a candidate and I am going to support my candidate. If we have to trust him, we have to have the whole package, not half of it.
All right,
and this is also the problem.
And the future's unwritten when it comes to what's going to happen next. I want to thank you so much, Mamadou Diouf, for being with us from New York City, Ramasala Dieng in Edinburgh, Doudou Sidibé for being with us ahead of that meeting with other opposition leaders. Ambassador Normand, thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.